Bonjour and welcome into The Cave. My guest today has been the vocalist of a band from Michigan for more than 15 years. He's a master of storytelling, and if you've ever seen them live, you know the feeling of crying and screaming at the top of your lungs right along with him. If you don't know who I am talking about yet, that probably means that you don't know the band, and in that case, you're very lucky because you're about to experience them for the first time. He's gonna tell me what his worst fears are. I bet they look a lot like mine. Dreyer from La Dispute is here with me today. Hi, Jordan.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, thank you. By the time this episode is out, your new record, No One Was Driving the Car, will have been released, but right now as we record it, it's not yet. How are you feeling about it?
Excited. Yeah, it still feels a bit like nebulous, the release. It always kind of does. And even, everything that every benchmark in this band, including when we go on tour, always feels so far off until the day it arrives. Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited to feels like officially kind of closing a chapter in a way. Maybe that is not to imply that because we'll start touring and everything, and obviously the record has a life past the release date, but as far as the process of writing and recording, it feels you have like two moments where you have to, in a way, mourn the loss of it because it exists in your head and in the head of your bandmates for so long. And it's like, even when you're not actively thinking about it, you're kind of defaulting to it in idle moments because it takes up that much space in your life. And then when it's done recording, you're like, shit, now what? What's the next thing? It's sort of like grieving the loss of a part of yourself, or at least a part of a period of time in your life. And then there's like the whole process after, where you're working on figuring out how to release it to the world, and all the logistical things and all the press and the art, and how you find interesting ways to introduce it to people and the world at large. And we've been in the midst of that process now for almost a year, or for the better part of a year. And yeah, soon it'll be like another grieving process where it's out and it's everybody's, and then we're playing songs live. And yeah, so it's interesting. It's a fun process. I'm like excited for it to be out and to not think about it in this sort of abstract way, and to get to actually like interact with people who have been interacting with the music a bit more in venues during live performances. So pretty excited.
Yeah, I can imagine that it can be a relief for it to be done, because you have put so much heart in it. I hope that you're proud of it, because so far everything we've heard is just brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can imagine you were in your bubble with the other members and creating together. I guess there was a lot of adrenaline and everything happening, and and now everything just
definitely a relief. It's a relief in the sense, I think, that it just occupies so much of your life and of your headspace. And I think that I've sufficiently grieved that now, and I'm sort of ready to move to the next step, and also be able to like clear space in my brain to shift on to other things in the between time from tours. So I'm excited about the like clean plate, and like getting to figure out what the next thing is for me or for the band or whatever.
I can imagine that it can only be good things, because the feedback that I've seen from it has been so amazing. I've seen a lot of people saying that it's your best record so far, even though we don't have the last two songs. But
yeah, it's been really, really humbling, and we're very grateful for the feedback so far. And I think that first and foremost, your guiding light making art is to satisfy a creative urge and to make something you're proud of, and for us to make something together that we're proud of. And all the other stuff is sort of secondary. But I think because we felt so enthusiastic about this process after period of time in which we weren't certain we would have the opportunity to make another record, or some uncertainty about whether the industry would look the same or if it would be viable to bands of our size post COVID quarantine and etc. So I think that we just felt pretty excited, and making this record was hard but really fun for each of us, and I think it pushed us to be the best at what we each do, and I think that shows in the record. So in that respect, I think we were a little more attuned to how people would respond this time around than we had been in the past, because we just I don't know, we just felt like we maybe remembered what about making art we love, and I think it shows in the songs, and it's been really, really exciting and fun to hear that people are getting something out of them. And yeah, it's been kind of a blur, but it's been really quite fun.
Yeah, it just shows that if you put a lot of authenticity in what you're doing, in the end, it pays off.
Yeah, I think so. I think intensity and authenticity, just like being honest about why you do what you do, and being grounded in, the abstract value it adds in your life and in the lives of others to make art. And I think it feels particularly important, not just for like us, but art in general in the 21st century, to like keep like following the arrow north on the moral compass, and like do what you do because you love doing it, and you care about it beyond just like dollars and cents. And it's not always the easiest thing to do, because you have to put bread on the table or whatever, but like it feels increasingly important to like make art and be honest about why, and to do it for reasons that have some sort of merit for the world. And we've always been kind of moved by our upbringing in punk and the community that it creates. Yeah, I think people recognize that, and I think maybe they recognize that even more so in 2025 than I did too when I was younger, in a different environment, a different landscape internationally and at home. So it's like, yeah, I'm rambling, but I think that people are really ready to engage with, and this again, this time I'm not speaking just about us, I'm talking about just art in general. Like, I think people really crave art that speaks to something, even if there's no intentional directive to follow it in one way or another. I think just like art is important, and the more we lose it in the face of late stage capitalism, the more we divorce art from its merit and place value financially, I think we lose a lot. And I hope that people like get, when they listen to our records, that we're just like 5 dudes who love music and love punk and love creating.
Yeah, I think we can totally see that in your new record, but we will come back to it a bit later, because talking about your upbringing, we're in punk and in all other genres. We're going to talk about the first lyrics we wanted to talk about, which is from the band Gastr del Sol and their song Blues subtitled No Sense of Wonder, in which we can hear most blues are subtitled either No Sense of Wonder or No Sense of Scale. For example, I Was Sleeping, subtitled I Have No Idea How Long, subtitled I Don't Care How Long, subtitled Why Not Untitled. I have dozens of titles. So first of all, I didn't know the band or anything, so that's a nice discovery for me. So Thank you for that. What did you choose this line, and what does it represent to you?
Sure. I think that above all, I tend to admire writing that accomplishes a lot with very little. I think that I am attracted to people who are economical with their words and still create either a sense of profundity or of contemplation that make you think about what exactly is being expressed or articulated. I think I'm attracted to writing like that because I am so far the opposite of it. I think that I am notoriously verbose and have a hard time with I would not editing, because I edit myself incessantly. I have a hard time with paring things down. It's something that I've worked on intentionally, and I think arrived at a place where I understand maybe that's not in my toolbox, and that I should focus on what I think I do well and engage with people who do the opposite effectively. And David Grubbs from Gastr del Sol, I think, very often has a way of working in unconventional structures and writing into the music of all of his projects, but specifically Gastr del Sol, where sometimes there'll be 6-7 minute songs with no vocals, and sometimes very, very few vocals, sparse lines that sort of, like, I think, operate in an atypical way from the majority of lyric writing, mine included for the most part. And I love that line. I think it speaks to me on a creative level. I think it feels like the internal monologue I might have processing my own craft. I can't really put my finger on exactly what about it I love, and I think that's part of what I love about it.
From what you were saying and the lyrics, for me it sounds like also not putting labels on things, or not expressingly saying what you are implying. I guess this is talking about depression. I'm thinking out loud right now, and I was sleeping, because when you are in those depressive states, you are sleeping a lot, and I have no idea how long. I don't care how long. And yeah, I find it very interesting that you're also attracted to it, because it's, yeah, as you said, this song is 6 minutes long, I think, and this part is half of the song.
It's half
of the
lyrics.
Yeah, exactly.
And the second verse is a variation on the first.
Exactly.
So it's very, very few words for a song that covers 6 minutes, but I think it speaks. I mean, to me, I think that's very astute. I think when I listen to the song, and when I think about the lyrics, I feel like I'm witnessing like a philosophical conversation on the manner in which this person presents their art. And there's a sort of conflict in introducing the line by saying, you know, most blues are subtitled No Sense of Wonder, like an immediate, like, what feels like a self-criticism, a way to like challenge the conventions of a particular type of art or songwriting, to make a blanket statement sort of about a lack of curiosity in one thing, and then to go through the process internally in a solitary moment about how you might consider that criticism in the context of your own writing, and transitioning at the very end to, you know, it's the why not and the why not, but like, I have dozens of titles, and what obstacles do I encounter in attempting to present myself in an authentic way, given conventions of the art form in general? And I think that's part of the reason that this lyric in particular, I knew I wanted to pick one of the lyrics from this particular record, but that one is the one I felt most attached to. And I think partly it's because I have that same conversation with myself as an artist, and as somebody who, with his bandmates, makes music that I think requires a considerable amount of careful thought and intention and intellectual and emotional exploration. And that sometimes I think can be pigeonholed in a genre that I don't necessarily think fully encompasses our art as practice. And, you know, I think that there's a way in which you are maybe dismissed in a certain way as being, I don't know, juvenile, or at least like too forthright in how you speak about your life and about your emotional reactions to it. And I think that really like misses how essential it is to have conversations. There's like a stigma around being open and vulnerable about what you feel or what you see. And I think that is a pretty backwards criticism, because what utility does art serve if not to contemplate life's big questions and to comment on the human condition? And in that respect too, I think this song kind of like maybe in a different context for our band, but feels like a way to kind of reckon with our accepted notion of how one thing or another should be presented to have merit or to instill movement in somebody's personal life or elicit a complex reaction when you experience it. I don't know. I just think that like we close ourselves off to a lot. So, but I also, I find myself internalizing those criticisms in a way that makes me second guess at times when writing how I write or how I perform. And, you know, especially in the internet age where like things become catchphrases and the way we disseminate art on the internet really reduces it to one element that's appealing to a large audience. And having spent so much time with the music world's idea about what our band is being dictated by the song Such Small Hands, you sort of feel like a little bit like people are taking a very small aspect of what you do and defining the rest of what you do by it. And I think we've always felt a little bit, or maybe not all of us, maybe just me, but like I think a little frustrated that it's hard to break out of that for people. And I think in that way, I start to think about like, how do I make this sound? How do I arrange this string of words or this line in a way that like combats a preconceived notion based on someone's affiliation with a very specific thing? And I think that in itself is like a bad impulse creatively.
Then in the end, you're not creating only for yourself, but for the feedback it will receive.
Right.
Coming back to your new record, has it been something you thought about while recording it? Because I've seen a lot of people, also even one of your members, I don't remember who, in your documentary where you were in the studio, that this is the most La Disputée album.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like what was liberating about this process was the complete lack of consideration for how it would be perceived. I think that I was like hesitant to hammer this angle when I spoke to journalists about the record, but I think it's pretty essential to understanding it. And I think it's essential too for me to understand the last 5 or so years of my personal life, that COVID had a pretty profound effect on the world, but also like my mental health and my relationships. And I think for us as a band, after Panorama, having everything shut down and get kind of cloaked in a level of uncertainty about the future of the industry or about our ability to continue on in a self-sustaining way in the industry, and to have spent so much time away from each other and not able to exercise a part of our brain that La Dispute has allowed us to exercise for so many years was really hard. And when we came back to touring again and to being in our rehearsal space together playing music and then writing after that, I think we really just felt grateful that we are still able to pursue a dream we had when we were teenagers, to keep spending time, valuable time together making things. And I think it's the most La Dispute record because everyone was firing on all cylinders. We were just excited and enthusiastic about the idea and how it was coming together, and about, in general, the opportunity to do so again after a period of uncertainty. And in that way, I think that like this was the record out of all of our records that we were, certainly since we all lived in the same place and we could practice twice a week and write music twice a week, the most we've like hyperfixated on it and just like completely lost ourselves in the process of writing and recording. And yeah, so it's just like, it was the 5 of us remembering that we're each good at the thing that we do, but even more importantly than that, that we all do it really well together, and that we we
as a
know
band,
each
yeah.
other better. Yeah, we just like, we've been a band for a long, long time now. And I don't know how it happened. It's like you blink, you're the young band, and then you blink and you're almost 40 and you're still doing it. And yeah, and you just know each other better than anything. I said it in another interview, but it felt like divinely inspired, which is not my actual take on the situation. But I think that knowing people that well and working so long creatively, you just like have a level of comfort and familiarity and trust in each other that allows these sort of miraculous moments to occur without forcing the idea. You just know when it happens that it happened, and it's magic in a way. And that was the kind of the whole record process for us.
So you worked very hard on it, but you didn't think too hard before of how it should be, and you just did it and then made
Yeah,
it happen.
we had an idea and we had a structure, and I think it just felt like recapturing a sense of identity to get to pursue it. And the years of doing it together, I think, culminated in a process that is natural and efficient.
And coming back to the line of Gastr del Sol, is there a connection or a difference between how you, as a listener, interpret this song and how you, as a writer, approach this song and how you feel about it?
I think that like another byproduct of struggling to transition out of the COVID quarantine and into this like era in which we're all, I think, feeling innately a collective unease about the world and the political situation internationally and the effects of capitalism and the disparity of wealth and all these different things, the way that music industries changed financially and the way that art has changed and become increasingly commodified by the way we consume it and the algorithms that dictate what we do or do not consume. I've really realized again how important art is to me, not making it necessarily, but just engaging with it. And I've made a concerted effort in the last year when we got done with the record and I sort of was able to process the last 5 years of my life through the record. I think that like what I realized was I need to do more of what fulfills me.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that is art and listening to music and going to art museums and making things outside of the band as well as inside of it. And I think that when the record was done and I was able to like grieve its loss in a way, and I think I could listen to music again in a way that I hadn't in a very long time. And I tend to like in anything that I absorb, think about what the artist might have intended, or at the very least, what process they utilized to arrive at whatever I'm engaging with. So when I first started listening to this record, and I thought a lot about like why it works, but ultimately what I love about it is how I don't understand every way in which it works. I just like know it does. I know it elicits a reaction in me, a sense of excitement, and I don't really know that I can separate how I engage with art from the fact that I am so motivated by wanting to do so myself. But when you have something that like is sort of cloaked in ambiguity, like the writing on this record, I think it really opens you up to accepting that there's beauty in mystery and
Mm-hmm.
not knowing. And that I think is why I ultimately aspire to be more economic in the words that I choose, because I think generally I'm pretty descriptive, and I really appreciate the sense of wonder that I feel listening to this song and reading the lyrics to it, as opposed to my own writing, which often is like telling you that there's a lamp on the table when I'm talking about two people in a room, you know, like, so I really enjoy
Mm-hmm.
letting the mystery linger.
But I think in your songwriting, there's still room for everyone's own interpretation, which is also good, and which I guess is what you are also saying, that you don't need to know exactly what the writer meant or what the artist wanted to show, but this is, you are feeling this because of this, and this is the most
Yeah.
important to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, for me at least, you know, I think strength has been in observation, and I think that, like, it's always been a pretty prominent guiding principle to dictate how things occur and to observe and articulate the variety of feelings that occur after an event, after a moment of tragedy or a small tragedy at home, a quiet conversation about discontentment or whatever. But to not say too explicitly how somebody should feel about what I'm talking about, because I don't know. And that's been with me from more or less the outset of our band to varying degrees of success. But like, I think I learned that on our first proper LP on Somewhere at the Bottom of the River Between Vega and Altair, was writing songs about people's divorce and not my own, and not somebody immediately connected to me, but the parents of friends. And it felt like a powerful story to tell and to put in song, but it was really important to me, because it was someone else's story, to do so without suggesting somebody administer fault in one direction or another. That shows up on Wildlife too, and the song King Park. Like, I chose to tell that story from the perspective of a narrator who was not there, and cue into the fact that they weren't, and to sort of float above the scene and describe what happened and let people draw their own conclusions. I think ultimately you're like trying to be faithful to the events of in real life, but also to the many potential reactions one might have after experiencing it, and to allow people to draw whatever conclusions they might in how it reflects their experience. And
yeah, especially talking about King Park, it always gets me when you finish with "don't want to know how it ends." So if you don't know the story, you can just imagine, and after the
yeah,
full climax of the song.
right, and ultimately it's like, it's not important. Like,
Mm.
I think I left that open-ended because I didn't feel like it was the relevant part of the story so much as the environment that created it was, and all of the different social dynamics that lead people confined to poverty by the structures in place to turn to other means for survival, and the way that these stories are represented to us in our local media ecosystems, and the way that neighborhoods are connected. The fallout was important to me, but not necessarily the specifics of it. I think it was just an opportunity to articulate the complexity of life and the inevitability, I think, of the violence that occurs everywhere, every day, not just gun violence in our country, but the violence of somebody struggling with an opioid addiction on the street, the people who are left behind, the communities that are marginalized, the accidents that befall everyone indiscriminately, privileged and unprivileged. Like, it's always been more important to me, I think, to just reflect the environment and allow people to go where they might from there. And I think the wrong choice would have been to say what happened at the end, because it implies a level of superiority and importance over the rest of the content, the rest of the subject matter.
Yeah, no, I think it was the perfect ending. So
Thank you.
So we switched back to more of your writing, and so perfect transition to the second part, where now you also wanted to talk about your song Self-Portrait Backwards, and especially the line where you actually draw a self-portrait with the lyrics, "Pin them all on the wall. In the garden I didn't plant April. A non-figure silhouetted by phone screen light last fall. Color study, black and blue, age 32. Abstractions, me and you, ongoing series. On the highway at night at 29. Still life with red wine and Vicodin. 2013, A Smiling Kid with Stitch Face, age 11, Color Study, Shades of White, 1987, exhibition Work in Progress, incomplete. So you're basically exhibiting moments of your life.
Mhm.
Can you explain your choice for this lyric and the choice of those moments?
I think that this song presented a lot of challenges for me beyond even just the fact that it is a quiet song on acoustic guitar, and I think requires consideration of melody that I'm not generally forced to confront or capable of confronting. It's not really my skill set, so I think there's a degree to which I appreciate this song for that reason, or it required me to work outside of a level of comfort that the majority of the other songs on the record don't. And I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to write about in this song, other than I had a pretty vague idea of the self-portrait idea. Originally, I wanted to call the song Self-Portrait at Nearly 40. I wanted something that involved a bit of self-examination, and eventually pivoted to the title Self-Portrait backwards, and this image of curating an exhibition in reverse to explain who you are. And that was like sort of the epiphany moment for me. And I had not written parts to this song until we were in the studio, so it was like there was a level of anxiety about the fact that I hadn't, and I was much closer on the majority of the other songs to an actual idea from beginning to end. But it was challenging in the respect that it required me, who is extremely verbose again in the way that I write, to do so with limited space and to really tell a pretty far-reaching story in a short period of time and in only so many words. And I think that's ultimately why I feel particularly connected to this song lyrically, because I think I accomplished it in a way that I am proud of.
Mhm.
And that speaks backwards a bit to what we were talking about with Gastr del Sol, is just like finding a way to tell a story that covers years, that covers a pretty big topic, but does so in a less wordy, less descriptive way. And I, at some point, having written the first two sort of stanzas in this song, I had another moment of epiphany where I thought, oh, how can I actually cue in the audience to experiencing somebody's timeline in a gallery and at an exhibition, and trying to figure out how to write fake titles for paintings that both clued somebody into the event that inspired each individual entry, but also sounded like paintings, and that also had some consideration for the chronology of time. So I was really just proud of how I navigated that. And I think each painting title is in itself a story in only so many words, and it leaves so much open to interpretation of what might have occurred at that moment to inspire that given title. And I think that that stands in pretty sharp contrast to the majority of the writing I do, which is telling people pretty explicitly what's going on.
Because we can see those moments, but also, once again, interpret them for ourselves, and in a few words, we know what was happening, but without really knowing. And you're like opening your own book of your own life to us without really going into details, but still we can feel a connection
Sure.
with that.
Yeah, I'm glad that comes across. I think that even, I don't know, Still Life with Red Wine and Vicodin, just the combination of things, I think, implies a heaviness true to the moment itself. And even the two tracks that begin with Color Study, like Color Study Black and Blue age 32, I think implies something, but less so without Color Study Shades of White 1987. Like there's a lot of interplay between the things that I think also helps you get a vision of maybe turmoil, maybe just like idle discontentment or depression or whatever, but like I think it takes you on a trip in a way that I'm proud of. Again, I think mostly because I found a way to do it without being explicit about it.
So it doesn't feel like, is it a word in English, voyeurism?
Yeah.
We can guess and we just don't know all the details and we don't need to.
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly done.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Coming back to your documentary, so it's in 4 parts because you released so far the album in 4 parts, and this one was called Returning to the Womb, which is pretty explicit in those lyrics because it's literally to the year of your birth. Those parts of the albums deal a lot with family and memories. Is that how you wrote the album? Did you write all those 4 songs in this part together?
We did for the most part, yes. So we, generally speaking, start with like an idea, a theme, a title, generally, and have always operated that way. In every instance, the title of the record has come years before the actual record, and I'll pitch my idea when I feel like it's materialized enough in the stories that I've collected over the years and the title I've arrived at, to my bandmates. And generally that involves structure for the record, for how I think the story would be effectively told, or told in an interesting way at the very least. And often we borrow from other mediums to sort of build said structure. Somewhere at the bottom of the river is mythology and folk tales, and Wildlife is a book of annotated short stories, and Rooms of the House is sort of like a domestic family novel. Panorama, originally we kind of talked about doing a film and pivoted away from that. In some respects, as the record went on, it became kind of more a prose poem, a dream, sort of much more internal than I think most of our records are. And we kind of came back to film for this one because we moved away from it so early on in Panorama. And I pitched the structure of the record first to everybody, where it would occur in 5 acts, and we would begin in point A and move to B, C, D, E, and to the end of the record. I mean, initially the record was going to start where the song Environmental Catastrophe Film was going to start. That was going to be earlier in the record. We were going to start sort of with that, like, exploration of personal history and of the environment in which I or the character stand-in for me was reared, and then pivot to the present moment, and ended up reversing that part of it and starting in the present and transitioning at Environmental Catastrophe Film and moving into recollections from the past. And we knew where all the songs for the most part would go, so we knew that that third block would be the stories that they ended up becoming. So we were pretty deliberate about where we want things to be when we write.
And the way you're talking about it, it feels like this record is way more personal than the others. And also in the documentary, I found it very interesting because you said that you're someone that is pretty avoidant. So I guess you're not speaking a lot about your feelings, and also the whole mood there was after you recorded I Dreamt of a Room with all my friends. I don't want to sound too cliche, but was it a bit like a therapy writing it and really going into what you're feeling?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, every record is, like, to varying degrees, a combination of my life and a fictionalization of it, incorporating elements from other experiences and stories, or fabricating them to accomplish one thing or another. and every record is sort of like underwritten by my personal experience in that way. Rooms of the House is like the most fictional of all the records, and the most I fabricated from nothing, the story, although there are different things that I took from my life and altered to fit. And, you know, Wildlife is intensely personal at times, but also has a lot of songs that are about things that did not occur to me. Panorama is very personal. That record is a lot of like internal thought, but it's also, I think, a little bit harder to parse. It's a little bit more ambiguously written, and that was by design. So then the new record is a sort of combination of all three of those things. There are aspects that are like pretty fictional and that I didn't have like a very strong personal emotional attachment to beyond they elicited a feeling of anger or frustration or sadness or whatever. But there are other songs that are like pretty directly about my own personal, you know, my own personal life, my own struggles and conflicts and turmoil and drama. And I Dreamt of a Room in particular was one that like I was processing a lot that I didn't even necessarily understand I was processing, which has been one of the big revelations about what utility being in this band has served me over the years in my personal life. And I think that in being just like a person who is avoidant by nature and who I think tries to a fault to put others before himself and to be, I don't know, I'm socialized as a straight white male in the Midwest of the United States. I think there's like a implicit push to shoulder burdens and to place them in the back of your head. And I think that I really understood in making this record, not even more so recording the parts than writing them, how much I use this band and writing as a way to have conversations with myself about what I'm feeling. I'm not necessarily certain that is a particularly healthy thing, but I think it is a reality of my life. And if it isn't healthy, then I need to figure out other ways in which to have those conversations with myself and the people in my life who love me and who I love. But it is interesting that like when we're writing and I'm putting lyrics to the music that's been written, I'm just very, very lost in the process of doing so and of the arrangement of syllables and the dynamics in my part, how I present myself, that I don't really think too intently, or at least like allow myself to be emotional about it while I'm writing. It's really after, when I go to record, when I have to consider the authenticity of my performance and try to capture that feeling as best I can, that I like really understand how much I haven't really talked about those things until that moment. And that was, there were multiple times in the studio where I had to go, oh shit, I haven't like really figured this out for myself. And I'm doing so right now in the studio while everybody's in the control room listening to me break down. So it's it's good. It's a good thing, I think, but I should have more things that allow me to do that.
Yeah, I recognize a bit myself in you in what you're saying, because I'm also not a person who talks about her feelings. And you think that internalizing everything, understanding where it comes from, writing it is enough, and then you're done with it. And then when you're in the studio, I guess you actually say the words. And
you're speaking them aloud. You're like,
yeah,
actually allowing yourself to feel them in a way that you don't when you're writing. I was in Germany speaking to another music journalist, and we were sort of talking about this same topic, and he was saying he spoke to Jarvis Cocker from the band Pulp, and how he was saying that he's talking about recounting a story of him and his wife fighting about something, and her saying like, why didn't you like talk to me about this? And he was like, I did talk to you about this. It's in this song. And she was like, that's not talking about it. That's putting it in a song, right? Like, and
Yeah.
just after a while, you like, if you aren't in a position to like speak directly and self-evaluate what you're feeling and how you're affecting other people, what you do for work ends up being that outlet. The studio for this record was like my moment of realizing that in my own existence. Like, I've done this for, in some way, shape, or form, for 20 years now, and it's really become kind of the way that I process things. And that was like another realization too about the effect that like the last 5 years have had on me. Was like, I knew that I missed playing music. I knew that I missed being with my bandmates and performing live, but I didn't really understand like how important a function it fulfills in my everyday life until we were in the studio recording, and I was like, oh, I haven't actually thought about this stuff since we did Panorama.
Yeah, and it would be way easier to just be able to communicate directly, but sometimes you just need to find other ways. So
Yeah.
at least you are communicating. So I think it's healthy still in a way.
Healthy-ish. We're all in the process of becoming healthier
Exactly.
people. So
When you look back at your song years later, when you put out all your feelings on it, and sometimes you don't feel those feelings anymore, how do you look back at those songs?
yeah, I mean, for a time, I think I looked back with like a combination of regret and embarrassment. I think there's like an added aspect of making art that becomes property of the public when you release it. There have been times where I've maybe felt I expressed something irresponsibly, or didn't have enough opportunity at the time to really articulate the nuance of a feeling, and, felt a little bit like people were maybe internalizing something that I had not intended, and you regret that, and you feel a little bit of embarrassment sometimes for the way you've done something in the past or said something in the past. I think the older I've gotten, the more like I understand that what happens beyond the creative process between the five of us is out of my control, and that being hung up on what became of it after the fact is maybe like an unnecessary way to self-flagellate and punish. I think that like when you make anything, when you make art, when you write something, when you paint something, you're capturing a very specific moment in time. You're making a time capsule of a feeling, of an experience, and you get older and you understand how similar that is to just how you internalize your own past selves. And I spend less time feeling regret over what I've written or how I performed something now, because I understand it to be a part of what brought me to this moment, to the present day. And you're never going to like get everything 100% right, because you can always edit and always change. But if you can't commit to the finality of something, it won't ever be. So you just sort of have to accept that you took a photograph of a time and you put yourself into making it, and it has to just be okay for it being that, instead of something that you can go back and alter or adjust or incorporate new experiences or a level of maturation into it after the fact. It's just, it's done, and it's a snapshot of a time, and that's good. Those are important to have.
I think it makes sense because we all have regrets or feel uneasy thinking about how we acted, or even cringing to it or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with music, it stays forever. So, but in the end, it's just your past, and you probably
Yeah.
learned a lot from it.
Yeah, and like the beauty of it, I think after like, I wish this song didn't speak so much to people because I regret the experience that led me to write it, or the mindset that I expressed in the song ended up harming me in some way after the fact until I found a way through it. I think that I have to remind myself that it's kind of like egotistical to assume that people are internalizing the wrong lesson or not thinking about it in the same nuanced way that I do now. Like people are smart and critical and intelligent and capable of doing what anybody, well, everybody does the same thing with the art that they engage with. They like find something in it that speaks to them on something, and they grow to, and maybe they don't take the same lesson from something they did at an earlier age. They like, you just incorporate it into who you are and engage with it because of your own life experiences. And you just have to, as an artist, let that be and appreciate that people find meaning in anything that you do and probably take something different from it than you did at the time because they're different. They experience different things.
Yeah, maybe exactly. They need to hear what you are saying, even if you're not feeling it anymore, but it's the perfect moment for them to hear that.
Yeah.
10 years later.
Totally.
If you don't mind, because I feel like this can be very personal, and without saying why, can you name a few songs that you're thinking about when you're saying that?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like, I mean, there are, like I said, Such Small Hands earlier, there are like things I regret about, I do and don't regret that song because I don't know, like we didn't play it for a long time because we just kind of thought it was a bad representation of our band, and it just like, I don't know, it didn't feel representative of who we are. And then when we started giving less of a shit or like being less fucking full of ourselves about it, we just like started playing it again and had a lot of fun doing so. And I don't really care if people like hear the very dramatic darling in their head when they think about our band anymore, because why should I? The other one that comes to mind is the song Andrea, and it's another one that people really love. I think that I felt like the parts of that song that people really attach to, the last few lines of that song, I made overly important in my personal life, and I really put myself in a position where I was not capable of recognizing a bad situation and moving away from it and finding happiness for myself on my own terms. That's the one song that I really look back on and feel regret in that capacity, where I just like, I cringe a bit because I think what I see in myself is an earlier version of who I am, and struggles that I sort of self-imposed on myself by holding something up, putting it on a pedestal when I ought not have. And I guess I just, that's the one thing that I really have some regret about, because I think it is a misrepresentation, or it's not it's an accurate representation of that moment in my life. But I think it sounds like a really sweet sentiment in regards to somebody that you have spent time with and fallen away from. But I can see how refusing to part with that connection in my life closed me off to happinesses I eventually found, but reluctantly. And if you're in a situation where you love somebody and that love is not reciprocated back to you, you can feel a level of connection still to that person and what they might have represented for you at a different period of time and incorporate that into who you are. But I think refusing to create distance between those two things holds you back from new opportunity and new people and new experience. And that's the one that really stands out. I mean, there's parts of King Park that I wish I could do over. I think that it's a bigger story maybe than is capable of being told in so many words, even as the song is a whatever 7-8 minutes long. But I think that like there are parts of that song that I wanted to express that I did not do as well as I hoped, and I think there's a lot of that story that's missing from the song itself. And I don't regret that like people really attach themselves to the climactic conclusion and to the line, "Can I still get into heaven if I kill myself?" Because these are things that happened and they're powerful. But I regret that I was not capable of fully capturing the complexity of that situation, because I think I did it in some ways a disservice.
To a certain extent, you cannot influence how people interpret it, or not to everyone. I guess there would always be some room for anything, especially when you're doing some art and that you're not doing just a.
No, you're absolutely right. It's a fool's errand to like attempt to. Yeah, I don't know, because you're right that people take what they will, and I think that there are probably people who do fully grasp the things that I wanted to say. It isn't a textbook. I'm not recounting history in an academic way. I'm making a work of art ultimately inspired by the feelings it compelled me to feel in the moment. And when you're making music and that's your like guiding principle in some ways, then like you're grateful for the fact that it elicits an emotional reaction in an audience member, and it's not really up to. Yeah, but it's hard to like square in your brain sometimes.
You can always think about, oh, I could have done this better, done that, but. And art is subjective anyway, so everyone will have their own interpretation. And I also wanted to ask you, do you do any other form of art that we don't know about where you can express yourself?
Not as often as I should. That's again in like rediscovering what brings me joy and makes sense of my life. I've thought more intentionally about how to have more of it and how to be creative at all times instead of in the context of this band exclusively. I do write some, but not. It's been a while since I've done so in an intentional way. I think that I would like to, now that there is some space in my brain, start thinking a bit more about what I want to do as a writer, and if that's something that I have the capacity to excel at and to practice and to learn discipline. I do work part-time with a friend doing woodworking. That's a pretty recent development in my life, but that was another like aha thing where he asked if I would be able to help. He does fine woodworking and custom furniture and things like that, and has been doing it alone for quite a few years and wanted to scale up a bit and needed somebody with a pretty shallow learning curve. And I grew up in a hardware store with two carpenter brothers and have worked carpentry jobs. And yeah, he asked me, and I've been doing that for most of this year. And I get a lot out of it. I get a lot out of creative work in regards to writing, and writing songs is very fulfilling, but it's not always fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's challenging, and I love to do it, but it requires like a level of intense thought and effort that at times feels daunting enough that I, again, am able to like, or not even able, I'm like unable to not be avoidant and like push away starting. But
and
like,
it's your job, so you cannot really avoid it.
No,
not just for fun. And
I mean, you'd think I wouldn't be able to, but I'm very good at avoiding things. But one of the things that is really great for me about who I am and what the band does for me is that there are four other people who have different skill sets and who require effort to do justice for their contributions and their talents and skills. It lends a level of responsibility that forces me to make space in my life for creative work, and people who are like much better at a lot of the things that I'm not good at, who are better about being disciplined and deadlines and keeping something at the front of the line. And that I get a lot out of the band in that respect. But like, yeah, building furniture and what have you, it's creative work, but it requires a totally different thing from my brain. It's you're just like the same level of fixated on what you're doing without so many component parts that it feels like it satisfies that same urge, but also doesn't beat the hell out of my brain and isn't something that I avoid because it doesn't require the same level of effort to enter into it. Writing is like, oh, I have to force myself to do. I have to find time. I have to put aside every distraction that I have, and oftentimes it requires my bandmates dragging me, kicking and screaming along. But going to the shop and shaping wood and using tools, it's just very like precise work that allows me to like. I think I get that's therapy in a way to me, like just shutting my brain off and building something.
Yeah, totally get that. You're just on autopilot mode, fix it, just thinking about what you are doing. I'm the same. Well, I'm very bad with my hands, but just for example, doing a puzzle, or you do the same thing over and over again, and your brain is just thinking about that. It's very.
It's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very
It's
deliberating.
definitely. Yeah. I think it's very, yeah, the same thing. I mean, I used to always say like, I love to, shovel the snow when I lived in Michigan before my partner and I moved to the West Coast to Seattle. I missed that because like if it snowed, I could go out and clear the sidewalk in the driveway and it's just very like that. You're just focused and like your brain is empty and that's a really good feeling, a necessary one.
Well, we've been talking for a while now, Jordan, and thank you very much for so many good insights into your brain, your art, this record.
Thank you for
Really enjoyed it.
indulging all of my long-winded tangents. I'm hyper aware of the fact that I speak a lot when I speak to people, but I think I do so because I get a lot out of it, and I appreciate you taking the time and asking insightful questions and for listening to me blather on.
No, I really loved it. And so I will just close it by asking you what's next for La Dispute, obviously touring in the US and then in Europe.
Yep. So we leave pretty soon for the first No One Was Driving the Car tour leg in the US, and just 3 weeks, and then we're off for a while, and then Europe, and then the US again, and next year will be a decent amount of traveling around for the record and touring, and we're all excited about it. And I think right now, just grateful and excited to have the opportunity to still do this, and I think sooner than later I think we have enough individual and collective momentum right now and good feelings after this process to jump into something relatively soon. It usually takes us a few years to do a record, so I'm hesitant to say like it'll be quicker this time, but I do think that we're all like pretty excited about having found this thing again in the way that we did, and I think we'll probably keep making music when the time feels right, and I think it might be sooner than it has been in the past. Fingers crossed. And then, yeah, who knows? And try to figure out how to be a creative person more consistently and work towards some other things on my own end in the downtime.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to see what's next, and I will probably be at your show in Munich, so I'm very excited about that too.
Cool. Very excited that you'll be there. Thank you for all of this. Yeah.
So for everyone listening, go listen to La Dispute's new album, No One Was Driving the Car, that has been just released, because it is really just a gem of a record. I will talk to you again next week. Bye!